Hermit Ducks, it's Simon here. Welcome back to the Hermit's Cave. So I've come on today to do a video response to the fabulous Jen from Jen's Balance Tarot, who I just saw this morning. She had uploaded this video and I thought it was I haven't done a tag for such a long time, and I thought it was a really good one to kind of sink my teeth into, but one that's really challenged me. And I'd had a chat with Jen anyway about her ideas for this tag. And I remember thinking, oh, that'll be fun, and I can use this deck and this deck. But it's actually in preparation turned out to be a lot more challenging than I anticipated, particularly when I got to like the wands area. So to explain, this is called Balancing the Deck Scales. So hashtag Balancing the Deck Scales if you want to join in. Use that hashtag so we can all see everybody's responses. And it's talking about decks that you might use as a pairing in relation to each of the 5 elements. 5 elements being the fire, water, air, earth, and spirit. And when we say balance, or when Jen talks about balance, it doesn't necessarily have to be, like light and shadow, anything as dramatic as that. But, 2 sides of the same coin. So they may be very similar, but give you a different perspective or give you a different viewpoint. And, if I'm going for something around relationships with people or any sort of emotional turmoil that I might be going through, so therefore the cups element, which 2 decks would pair nicely together but give me a more rounded sort of perspective. So that's certainly the way I'm going to respond to this. So like I said, when I got to fire and thinking about what drives us and passions, that was a little bit more challenging. But anyway, what I will do is I'll flip the camera around and we will have a look at what my choices are in relation to those 5 areas. So this will be 10 decks in total, and why I've chosen the ones I've chosen to represent each of the elements and how I feel that they balance each other out. Okay, so let's dive straight in. So the first element to look at is the element of earth, which of course is, around practical. It's about our home life. It's about our career, our work. I always kind of think of it as the bottom tier of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, shelter, that just the earthy kind of day-to-day practical situations that we might find ourselves in that we consult with the tarot. And I think a really good deck that I like to work with for that is the Urban Tarot. Kind of does what it says, but this is the indie version. It's been re-released now with bigger images, different cardstock. But this deck in particular, is very based, because it's an urban tarot, it's based around New York. It is very earthy. It's very much concerning itself with the material world. And I just find that using this deck in particular, that one always reminds me of the Joker. Anybody else see that? It really grounds you. I just love that. This is my favorite card in the whole deck. It's the Temperance card, and you can see the RWS Temperance imagery. That's this beautiful street art. And look how it's blending, and you've got the opposites here, the fire and the water. Oh, it's just wonderful. So the Urban Tarot, that card is problematic. I believe, if I remember rightly, that's been removed and replaced in the mass market edition. But yeah, so in terms of, having a viewpoint and a perspective when working with the earth element, I find the Urban Tarot really good for that. I love these 2 dudes just hanging out here. It is Thoth based, so you do get keywords with the minors. Love her. I think she's such a matriarch. So this is a wonderful, wonderful deck for that, for me. So, offering a different perspective, because this is very much sort of based in the here and now. I could not talk about earth-centered decks without mentioning the Druidcraft. I have a couple of versions. This is the one that is totally naked and cut, so it doesn't have any... and it's interesting that this is the Temperance card again, but here we have the Glastonbury Tall and Chalice Well, but this is... And I was debating between using this one and Pagan Otherworlds, because Pagan Otherworlds gives you that escapism, and it could be in any time. But this reminds me, you know, of an age long gone by. So it's very different to the Urban Tarot, but it's still very, for me, very earth-centric, very, you know, concerning itself with the element of the earth. And paganism for me is about revering the earth and looking out for the natural cycles and following the wheel of the year. And again, with this tag in particular, the reason why it really challenged me as well is because, and I think Jen made reference to this as well in the original post, where, you know, the tarot in itself has all of the elements, all 5 elements, the major arcana being the spirit element. And of course, then you've got your minors, your 4 suits that are split down into fire, water, earth, and air. So it is quite difficult because you choose a deck like this, but of course it's got water energy in it, and it's got fire energy in it, earth energy, and thoughts, you know, so it's all there. I love that. That's the long man. So yeah, but this one gives me a great perspective when working with earth energy as well. So then we move on to our water element, and this one was challenging as well. But when I think about water, yeah, particularly working with it refers to the heart. Very often talks about romance or relationships, and not all relationships are romantic relationships. We form relationships with family members, with our friends, our peers, our colleagues, you know, professional relationships. There's all types of relationships, but all of those relationships involve you know, a degree of emotional investment. And emotions, I am somebody who's very much guided by their emotions. I have a very high emotional EQ. I was going to say an emotional IQ. So you know, my EQ is higher than my IQ. I am very emotionally intelligent. And that's sometimes been to my downfall, but also I wouldn't have it any other way, because I rely on my emotions. And I feel that as I'm getting to kind of middle age, that my emotions are more fine-tuned. I've chosen the Light Seers, and the reason why I've chosen the Light Seers is just because it invokes in me strong emotions. I react to this on an emotional level, and this deck, it's just wonderful. As you will recall, it was recently in one of my top 10 all-time favorite decks. But I mean, just look at the expressions, look at the heartfelt emotion that this deck gives out. It is just wonderful. Look at the Queen of Pentacles. How beautiful is she? And I was fortunate enough to get an art print of that card. Yeah, so for me, if I'm working particularly around emotional development or trying to understand or process something that's on an emotional level, then I tend to reach for the Light Seers. I just find it really beautiful, really beautiful. And there is, I mean, even this feels very watery. You know, there's this movement like water. The hair is like it's underwater. There's glistening like, you know, there is a surface here. And it is just, it's just stunning. And I love to work with this deck. So, Lightseers. Okay, now my next choice of deck, even though I said it didn't have to be such a stark contrast, but it is, again, it's a deck that really invokes an emotional response. And it is very different to Lightseers. And it might come as a surprise, but it's the True Black Tarot. And I haven't talked about this deck much. I was lucky enough to be gifted the prototype cards a good 13-14 months before the deck release. Arthur Wang sent me at the prototype, and then he sent me this deck as well. And I know it's a little bit expensive, but the production quality is phenomenal. And this was the first, as in when the prototype was released, deck that had this, what we now call the rose petal finish, the skin tone. And I know he kind of wanted this deck to be released before, you know, other deck creators caught onto it, but that wasn't the case. And there was a couple of decks that were released with this finished. But when I was sent this prototype back in 2017, was it 2017? Yes, I think it was 2017. I was just blown away by this. But again, the reason why I've chosen this is because I feel that it's the same side of the coin, but providing a different perspective, a different viewpoint. But it feels very watery. It feels like an emotional deck. There is all these little spots of light, like it's all underwater. It's very floaty. I mean, it's one of the most beautiful decks. The reason why I don't talk about it a lot is because when I use this deck, I do use it on a very much in a personal way. So yeah, I don't shout about it a lot because it's one of those decks that is just for me, if that makes sense. And there's a lot of talk out there about it anyway. You know, lots of people are talking about this deck or have been talking about this deck. But it's wonderful and it really helps me on an emotional level, but in a different way than the Lightseers. So we kind of have light and dark. Okay, so that's the True Black Tarot. My balanced deck to the Lightseers. Okay, so that takes us on to our fire element now. And my first choice for fire element is the Marielle Tarot. I have so many versions of this now. And the reason why I'm choosing the Marielle for fire, and when we think of fire, it's what drives us forward. It's what keeps us going. It's the motivation. It's the passion. It's seeing a goal and wanting to achieve it. And with the Marielle, and I shared before, I had a hate-love relationship with. When I first got it, everybody was talking about it. I was new to the community. I wasn't even making videos. And I bought this deck and I was intimidated by it, you know, completely intimidated by it. I was learning RWS. I got this deck and I was like, what the heck? Tried to read the book. It overcomplicated things for me. And I put it on the shelf and there it sat for a good 6 months. And then I saw a video, it was by Elle from Sacred Seed, and I felt an excitement about it. And I dug it out and I really did feel passionate about it. But what the Marielle did for me was that it drove me forward. It pushed me in a new direction. I mean, it's very fiery anyway. It's wonderful for all the elements, actually. but there is a lot of fieriness about this deck. And yeah, I was prepared to give up on it. And what this deck did for me was to remind me that you don't always give up on the first hurdle. You don't always, if things get a little bit tough, go into retreat mode, which, if I'm honest, I often do. I've mentioned before, so it's very airy as well. I've mentioned before how, I do get intimidated by things, and I have been held back in my life because of fear. And what this deck does for me is it pushes me, it asks me to go deeper, it takes me on a journey, which I think the fire element really gets us to do. We have to be passionate about things. We should want to succeed, we should want to stretch ourselves, achieve our goals, and have that drive. And the Mary L does that. So I've put the Mary L in for that. The counter deck, if counter's not really the right word, because as I say, it's not necessarily polar opposites, it's what gives different perspectives. But I've chose the Deviant Moon, and I really had to think about this, and there's a couple of other decks I was going to put in, and then I decided to put in the Deviant Moon instead, because this deck in particular, and this is a trimmed, bordered version, so it's a little bit smaller than the borderless. But again, this deck really evokes something in me. I do find it. How can I put it? A lot of people say to me that they find this deck too dark, and I don't find it too dark. I find it that it is shadowy. It is dark, but again, it connects me to something very primordial. There's something about these images that go way back into my, I don't know, my DNA, my psyche, whatever we want to term it. But there is a familiarization around this deck. What has that got to do with fire? Because this deck does give me the kick, very similar to Mary L, as it pushes you forward. This one kick starts me. So if I feel that I'm on this journey towards a goal, and I get into my old ways of feeling fear, or feeling that I'm not, I don't have the skills, or I'm lacking in some way, the Deviant Moon kick starts me and gives me that drive back again, because it connects me to many aspects of my life up until this present date, and it reminds me of situations that I've been in before, and it helps me to, like I say, just to recharge, have that kickstart, have that kick. Particularly the book that goes with that, with this deck, it's just wonderful for that. So that's the Deviant Moon, which is my balanced deck against the Mary L. So now we're looking at the fourth element of air, which is around the mind. It's about our thought processes. It's about personal developments, and just ideas and things like that. I don't know about anybody else, but I am somebody who lives very much in the head. I'm constantly within my own thoughts and my own mind. And the two decks, and this was for me, this was the easiest category to respond to. I knew instantly, this and Spirit, I knew instantly where I wanted to go with this and which decks I wanted to talk about. And the first one is the Spacious Tarot. What the Spacious Tarot does is it allows you to explore the crevices of your mind. The concept behind the Spacious Tarot is, particularly when we get to the majors, is that there is space here. There is space for you to work with the images and the archetypes of those cards by placing yourself there mentally. So here's a classic one, the Fool. The Fool card, there's the absence of the Fool. What you have here is this precipice, the edge of this precipice, this little ledge where the Fool would walk along. So you put yourself into the card and you occupy that space through the mind. And that brings out some really deep realizations. Because usually we will look at a tarot deck and we will see the image and we'll see the characters within that card depicting a scene, an emotion, a situation. But here we're left with all this space where we have to do the work mentally. And I just think the Spacious Tarot, here's the Hermit, the Spacious Tarot gives you that space to put yourself there through the mind and work through whatever your query is, whatever you're wanting to achieve, whatever it is you're wanting to gain clarity and insights on. I mean, who doesn't want to sit on that bench and look at that view? So I think the Spacious Tarot is just wonderful as an air deck. So, as a balance deck to work with the Spacious Tarot, I have chosen the Japaridze. Very, very similar. Remember, this is two sides of the same coin, but giving different perspectives. This one was once, at one point, my favorite deck. I absolutely loved it. I think it is very airy. You do have to do some work. I mean, if you're facing this card as an Ace of Fire, you really have to think about it and experience the cards. But I wanted to, and very similar to the Spacious Tarot, where you place yourself there in the mind. What the Spacious Tarot does is instantly give you a scene, so you automatically find yourself there. Does that make sense? Whereas the Japaridze, I find, is a wonderful deck for doing pathwork with. And for those it's perhaps new, or may have heard pathworking being mentioned but hasn't really explored the concept, it's where you take yourself into the scene. So usually through meditation or quiet reflection. But this deck and this card in particular was one of my first experiences of pathworking. There was a card within Deirdre of the Sorrows Tarot that I did my first ever pathwork with. But probably one of my most profound experiences was with the Four of Winds, which again, winds is air. But by doing pathworking and stepping into this scene, walking around this tree, looking at the landscape, feeling the air on my face, seeing these creatures, and really connecting with the card, it's wonderful, absolutely wonderful for that. So the reason why this is kind of like a different perspective or a different viewpoint from the Spacious Tarot is you have to do more work with this one. Whereas the Spacious Tarot is laid out, you've got that blank space, you automatically find yourself there. Whereas here, you may have to step into this card. You may have to turn that lock so she can find her way out, and escape the Eight of Swords. So, but it's such a beautiful deck. It's a wonderful, wonderful deck. And it's back in print. It went out of print for a while, and it's back now by US Games. I mean, isn't that a heartbreaking card? So that's why I've chosen the Spacious Tarot and the Japaridze Tarot for working with the element of air. So that brings us to the final category, which is decks that represent spirit which, you know, if we're talking about the major arcana, that's the spirit element of a tarot deck. So you have your 4 suits, which represent earth, water, fire, and air. And then the major arcana is the spirit. And for me, that is the major lessons. The spirit combines everything else. It encompasses. And a good way to think about it is here, I have the elements here as a reminder. So I have the earth, the water, the fire, and the air. But the spirit here, if these are all pushed together, that encircles those elements and provides the pentacle, you know, which is a very important symbol, full stop. I was going to say within paganism, but much more than paganism. So we have each of the elements, but they are encompassed by spirit. And spirit is, you know, I think of spirit about, you know, not just connecting with spirit, connecting with something greater than ourselves, whatever you believe that to be, whether it's, you know, the universe, or whether it is a god or a deity, but our spiritual development as well, you know. And it's so important that I think we view ourselves as being spiritual beings. We are human beings, not human doings. And it's important that we find time to, you know, just connect. Some people feel spiritual by listening to a beautiful piece of music, or sitting on the edge of a hill looking across a landscape, or out to sea, or staring up on a starry night into the universe, and just feel that connection to everything, that interconnectedness of all beings and the beautiful Mother Earth, Gaia, and the greater universe. So for me, my choices for decks that help me develop spiritually, and its first one is the only one that was the same as Jen's. I was watching hers thinking, oh, please don't say this, please don't say that. But it wouldn't have mattered if we'd got the same ones. But we certainly had the same one for spirit, which is the Shimmering Veil Tarot by Cilla Conway. This deck, I can honestly say, without any hesitation or doubt, has really helped me continue my spiritual journey. This deck just feels like it is channeled in some way. I don't know Cilla's processes for creating her art. I had the Day Was of Creation before this, and which is an oracle deck, and it was just wonderful. And I worked with a lot, but this deck is just so spiritually connecting. It is wonderful. And I look at this deck, and you might look at that and think, well, yeah, very fiery, but you know, spirit encompasses all the other elements. And it's just about our connection and whatever it is. And this connects me. It connects me to the universe. It connects me to other beings. It connects me to ancestors. I mean, how can it not? And it connects me to spirit. It is just so beautiful. Such a powerful tool. This, for me, is much more than a tarot deck. And as I said, it just feels like it's been created by channeling. Certainly some sort of visualization has taken place. Here's the Golden Fool, where the Fool, you know, makes his way, it's card 22, through all of the major arcana and becomes, you know, full, spiritually fed. So Shimmering Veil, I agree with Jen, is my choice for a deck that I go to for connecting with spirit and also for spiritual development. Now, as a as a balancing deck, I was going to put the RWS in and just say, you know, this for me is my number one spiritual tool. It's the deck that, you know, I learned with. It's the deck that I couldn't be without, and it's part of my spiritual growth and development. But I thought it'd be a bit of a everybody would be expecting that, and a bit of a cop out. So I'm going with one of my most recent decks, because I've only just started to work with this over the last couple of days. And this is the Fairy Tale Tarot by Baba Studios. The reason why I've chose this as a different perspective or viewpoint, again, is because aren't fairy tales not spiritual lessons? When I look back over my childhood in particular, I loved fairy tales. I didn't always understand the meaning behind those stories or the morals of those stories, because they're very subtle. And as a child, I don't think you're necessarily... It's a good starting point. It's a good grounding. But I don't think you're developed enough to be able to really get a grasp on all the hidden meanings and messages within fairy tales. But when we grow up and we experience life and we start off on our path and we revisit some of those fairy tales, then we are we're reminded of those stories of old, but we see them from a completely different perspective and viewpoint. So to me, you know, this deck, which is a deck based on fairy tales, they are life lessons. And those life lessons help me, certainly, to grow spiritually and to develop spiritually. And there are some gems within fairy tales. And yesterday on my Cup of Catching Cards, I shared a book that I just bought in this last week, which was Neil Gaiman's Instructions, which is billed as a children's storybook. But I just think it is much more of a spiritual tool for adults. So that's my choices, and yeah, very different between Shimmering Veil and Fairy Tale, but that's the purpose really of this tag that Jen's created. I will of course link Jen's video below. Do check it out. She's much more articulate than I am in explaining this and talking about the categories in particular. So do check out Jen's video. Let me know your thoughts, and I hope you take part as well. Remember, the hashtag is #BalanceTheScales, which is perfect for Jen, because Jen's channel is Jen's Balanced Tarot. And yeah, I've had lots of fun doing it. So thank you, Jen, for creating this tag. Thank you everybody else for watching. I hope you take part. I'll look forward to following the tag and seeing responses. And until then, go in peace. Namaste and blessed be.